Across Central Europe, there are thousands of narrow underground passages that seem to have no obvious life inside. At Saqqara, long corridors once held massive stone sarcophagi, each weighing around 40 tons. In China, the Longyou caves were found only after ponds were drained in 1992, revealing 24 artificial caverns cut from solid rock. We usually read ancient history from temples, pyramids, palaces, and cities on the surface. But the strangest parts of history may not be standing above the ground. They may be waiting under it. So here are 4 real underground complexes that should not be this strange. Start in Europe, where the mystery is not height or weight, but absence. The object is not a monument. It is a tunnel so narrow you have to crawl on your belly, the soil cold and close, the ceiling pressing down. These are called Erdstall tunnels, and more than 700 have been documented in Bavaria alone, with many more scattered across nearby regions. Imagine a body-sized crack, just wide enough for a single person to squeeze through, repeated across villages, fields, and hills. That number is the first problem. Not the length of any single passage, but the repetition. Again and again, people dug into the earth to create spaces that barely fit a human body. And when archaeologists study them, they find almost nothing inside. No cooking fires, no beds, no pottery, no bones. The tunnels are clean, as if they were never meant to hold the ordinary mess of living. The simple explanation says they were hiding places during war or escape routes or ritual passages, but a hiding place should still show signs of people waiting, eating, sleeping. An escape route should have an obvious exit. A ritual space should contain some object of devotion. These tunnels give back very little. Many of their entrances were sealed from the outside as if they were meant to be closed, not used. And the narrowness is not accidental, it is deliberate. Some sections are so tight that an adult can only move by pulling themselves forward with their elbows. A shelter wants comfort, a storage room wants space. These tunnels seem to want difficulty. The work-to-function ratio feels wrong. Digging a passage this tight takes immense effort. Crawling through it is exhausting. If you were building a refuge, you would want room to sit, to breathe, to survive. But the Erdstall tunnels demand something else. They force the body into a position of strain and vulnerability, and they do it over and over again, across hundreds of locations, with no clear written record explaining why. So the first underground rule becomes visible. Absence can be as strange as size. The number is not the length. The number is the repetition. Why would communities across Europe, century after century, carve passages that almost refuse to explain themselves? Europe gives us tunnels without a clear function. Egypt gives us underground corridors where the problem becomes weight. Like, subscribe and comment your location or local time if this mystery draws you in. Imagine stepping into one of these passages. The air is cold, the kind of cold that does not come from weather, but from soil that has never seen sunlight. The ceiling drops so low you have to bend forward. Then it drops again, and you are crawling. The walls press in from both sides. Not a cave, not a cellar. A body-sized crack, deliberately cut through the earth, with turns that force you to twist your shoulders just to move forward. This is not a space designed for comfort. It is not a space designed for storage or sleeping or ordinary daily life. A shelter wants light, ventilation, room to sit, room to breathe. An escape route wants speed, a straight path, a clear exit. These tunnels seem to want difficulty. They narrow, they bend, they force a person into positions that feel more like passage through a stone vein than movement through a human room. The standard explanations hover around refuge and ritual. People hid from raiders. People performed underground ceremonies. People stored food in cool darkness. Each of these ideas explains one part of the picture and leaves the rest untouched. Hiding places usually need a back exit. Ritual spaces usually leave some material trace. Offerings, markings, bones, fire pits. Storage rooms need floors that can hold weight and air that does not rot the grain. In many Erdstall tunnels, these things are simply absent. No hearths, no sleeping platforms, no thick layers of domestic waste. Just narrow passages, sealed entrances, and the same strange forms repeating across villages and hills. The work-to-function ratio is wrong. Digging in soil and soft rock is not impossible work, but it is slow work, hard work. Work that costs calories and time. A community that carves a tunnel network under a field or a church is spending real effort. Real effort wants a real return. If the return was safety, the tunnels should look safe. If the return was holiness, the tunnels should look sacred. Instead, they look like something else. A repeated, deliberate pattern of narrowness, secrecy, and movement. It is as if the builders were not creating a room, but a route through something that was supposed to be felt, not seen. Archaeologists have mapped hundreds of these sites in Bavaria alone. The Landesamt für Denkmalpflege und Archäologie Sachsen-Anhalt continues to document new finds. These are not folk tales, they are excavated, measured, and drawn. And the question they force is not, did people dig them? The question is, why did people dig so many of them, in so many places, with so little obvious use? The deeper you go into an Erdstall, the more you feel the strangeness. The tunnel does not expand into a chamber. It does not end in a room. It simply stops, or loops back, or narrows into a dead end. It is an underground shape that almost refuses to explain itself, as if the purpose was not to stay but to move through, not to live but to experience something that only darkness and pressure could provide. One tunnel can be dismissed as a local oddity, but when you multiply it across villages and regions, the pattern becomes harder to ignore. Europe's underground is full of passages that seem to want difficulty, not comfort. They turn the surface story into a thin layer over a deeper, stranger memory. And that is only the first pressure in this video, because Europe gives us tunnels without a clear function. Egypt gives us underground corridors where the problem becomes weight. 40-ton stone boxes, waiting in the dark, under the desert. The narrow, cramped Erdstall tunnels of Europe leave us with a mystery of function. Now we move to Egypt, where the problem changes completely. It is no longer about absence. It is about weight. About 20 kilometers from Cairo, near the ruins of ancient Memphis, the ground opens into a place called Saqqara. And beneath the desert, carved into the limestone bedrock, lie two long underground corridors. This is the Serapeum, a site in use from the New Kingdom through the Ptolemaic period. The official story is straightforward. It was the burial place of the sacred Apis bulls, animals revered as living manifestations of the god Ptah. But the story becomes uncomfortable the moment you see what was placed inside. Along those dark corridors, massive stone boxes sit in carved-out niches. They are sarcophagi, not small coffins, not human-sized. These were intended for the mummified remains of bulls, and each one is a single block of granite or similar hardstone, polished on the outside, hollowed out with sharp internal corners. The numbers are what make the place famous. A single sarcophagus can weigh around 40 tons. The lid alone can weigh 25 tons. That is not a tomb furnishing, that is a loaded truck, sitting underground, in a corridor where the ceiling is low and the turns are tight. The tomb explanation gives the reason. The stone gives the problem. The Apis bull was honored in life and death. That explains why the Egyptians would create such a monument. It does not explain how. We are not just talking about sculpting a heavy box. We are talking about quarrying a block of this size, transporting it across the desert, lowering it into a subterranean gallery, and then sliding it into a niche with precision. And this was not done once. It was done multiple times, over centuries. You have to picture the scene. A narrow, torch-lit tunnel. The air is thick and still. And somewhere in the darkness, a stone container weighing 40 tons is being moved. Every ramp, every corner, every chamber becomes a separate engineering problem. The sacred context does not make the stone lighter. In fact, it makes the brute force even more stark. A ritual of honor turns into a project of immense physical scale. So the viewer now has two different kinds of underground pressure. In Europe, the tunnels are tiny, and their purpose is missing. In Egypt, the purpose is written down. But the logistics of moving heavy stone in a confined space push the simple story to its limit. The Serapeum stops being a tomb and starts looking like a heavy mechanical workshop buried under the sand. How do you move stone this heavy through a corridor that was never meant to be a highway? And what does it say about an ancient workforce that could treat a 40-ton block as just another piece of a sacred installation? Now we have to go deeper into the corridors themselves, into the question of quarrying, shaping, and the sheer organization needed to place these objects where they still sit today. The 40-ton sarcophagus did not fly into the corridor. It was cut from a quarry shaped into a box, dragged or rolled to the edge of the shaft, lowered into darkness, and then moved through a narrow underground passage to its final chamber. The lid alone weighed around 25 tons. Every step of that journey multiplies the problem. The deeper you go into the Serapeum, the less the word tomb feels like enough. Quarrying a block of granite or hard limestone of that size is already a serious project. Shaping it into a container with flat surfaces, right angles, and a fitted lid requires tools, measurements, and a team that knows what the next cut is supposed to do. The transport across the desert surface adds another layer. Ramps, rollers, ropes, and the risk of a single stone sinking into soft sand. Then comes the descent. A vertical shaft or steep ramp, pulling a load that could crush a group of workers in a second if a rope snapped or a brace failed. And once the box reached the underground level, it still had to travel through corridors too tight for easy leverage, too dark for casual maneuvering, and too sacred to treat as a simple construction site. The official purpose of the Serapeum is well documented. Egypt's Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities identifies it as the tomb of the sacred Apis bulls, connected with the cult of Ptah and later Osiris and Serapis. Two long corridors cut into the rock, lined with niches that once held the mummified remains of animals treated as living gods. That explanation gives the place its name and its meaning, but it does not make the stone lighter. It does not reduce the distance from the quarry to the shaft. It does not explain how the work was organized, how the failures were absorbed, or where the knowledge of moving such mass through such confined space was stored and passed on. And now the pattern is beginning to form. The Erdstall tunnels we began with, those cramped passages across Central Europe, are not rumors. Regional archaeology in Germany continues to document them, map them, and debate their purpose. Some researchers lean toward ritual, some toward refuge, some toward a purpose that resists easy naming. But the physical fact remains. Hundreds of these narrow, twisting, sealed tunnels exist, and they required organized digging, spoil removal, and a reason to keep building them again and again. One underground structure can be explained as a local curiosity. Two begin to look like something more. 4 different systems, spread across continents and centuries, force a question that goes beyond any single site. The Serapeum and the Erdstall tunnels share a hidden thread. One gave us a mystery of function, the other gives us a mystery of logistics. But both point in the same direction. Immense effort spent below the surface, with a precision that does not match the simple stories we tell about the past. The standard explanation for the Serapeum focuses on religion and burial. And yet, when you stand in those corridors, or imagine standing there, with the weight of a 40-ton box pressing on the floor and the darkness pressing back, the word tomb starts to feel like a label on something much larger. A tomb is a resting place. The Serapeum feels less like a resting place and more like an underground machine built to move stone. What comes next takes this pattern and pushes it into a different kind of pressure. Europe gave us tunnels without a clear function. Egypt gave us stone without an easy explanation for how it moved. Now we go to China, to a place where the builders left no written story at all. No cult, no ritual, no king's decree. Just the work itself, carved into rock and hidden underwater. In 1992, in a quiet corner of Zhejiang province, a few ponds were drained. And what appeared underneath changed the scale of the underground question entirely. In the summer of 1992, a few farmers in Longyou County, in China's Zhejiang province, decided to drain some old ponds. The ponds were not deep. They were not large. They were just small pockets of water scattered across the local landscape, the kind of water that had been there for as long as anyone could remember. But when the pumps pulled the last of the water out, the bottom was not mud. It was stairs. Cut stone stairs leading down. And below those stairs, opening into the dark, were halls. Not natural caves, not small hollows. Artificial halls carved from living sandstone, with high ceilings, straight walls, and massive pillars left in place to hold the weight of the hill above. The ponds were not ponds. They were lids. In total, the draining revealed 24 caverns. 24 separate underground chambers, each one a deliberate subtraction of rock. The ceilings rose high enough to swallow a house. The walls were covered with parallel chisel marks, row after row, as if the builders had followed a single repeated pattern from one chamber to the next. This was not a cave someone expanded. This was underground architecture carved by removal. The scale is hard to absorb on first sight. Some of these halls stretch for more than 30 meters. The pillars that support them are not rough pillars. They are shaped, positioned, and left with the same tool marks that track across the walls like a signature. And the signature repeats. The simple explanation is that ancient workers quarried or carved the chambers for a practical purpose. Maybe storage, maybe shelter, maybe something else now lost. But here is where the explanation begins to feel too small. No clear construction record, no inscription, no local tradition that names the builders or explains why these hills were hollowed out at such a scale. The ponds were there for centuries. People fished in them. They watered animals in them. And all that time, those same people walked above 24 artificial halls without knowing they existed. The surface gave no hint. The water kept the secret. And when the water was gone, the architecture was standing there, complete, as if it had been waiting. That is the first shock. The second shock comes when you look at the tool marks. The chisel lines are so regular, so uniform, that they suggest a standardized method, a system. Someone taught someone else how to make that mark, and then that mark was repeated across an entire complex. The builders left their technique everywhere. They left their plan nowhere. 1 or 2 chambers might be a local anomaly. 24 chambers point toward organization, toward a workforce that knew what it was doing, that moved from one hall to the next with a consistent method, and that left behind not a single clear explanation of why. The missing record is not a small gap. It is a silence so complete that even the name of the site, Longyou Caves, is a modern label attached after the water was gone. The original builders did not carve their story into the stone they cut so cleanly. Or if they did, it has not survived. This is where the scale shift becomes undeniable. The Erdstall tunnels were narrow, body-sized passages repeated across Europe. The Serapeum gave us heavy stone moved through underground corridors, but Longyou gives us halls. Full halls carved from solid rock, with ceilings, pillars, and walls that speak of a construction site organized below ground. The viewer is now looking at a different kind of problem. The first 2 objects were about function and weight. Longyou is about absence, the absence of a story. The absence of a builder's name, the absence of any clear reason why 24 caverns were cut into sandstone and then hidden under ponds for centuries. What kind of organization carves 24 underground halls and leaves so little explanation behind? That question hangs in the air over the drained ponds, and it leads to the next one. What kind of planning leaves strong caverns but no clear memory of the construction? The marks are there, the halls are there, the instructions are missing. And that is exactly where the Longyou Caves push the pattern forward, from hidden function to heavy stone, and now to a lost chapter of underground engineering that someone, at some point, decided not to write down. The walls inside the Longyou Caves are not smooth the way natural erosion makes a surface smooth. They carry repeat marks, parallel chisel lines, row after row, separated by the same spacing across chambers that were cut in different directions. Pillars stand where they were left, holding ceilings that have not collapsed for more than 2,000 years. These are not accidental shapes. They are the signature of a deliberate method. Some studies estimate that the total amount of rock removed from these 24 caverns reaches nearly 1 million cubic meters. Think of it not as a building erected, but as a building carved out of the earth from the top down, a construction site where every piece of material is taken away, not added. The work did not go up. It went into the darkness. And yet the people who did this left no clear name, no commemorative inscription, and no construction record that survived. The written story is missing. That is the second kind of underground pressure. Erdstall gave us function without a clear purpose. Egypt gave us known purpose with impossible weight. Longyou gives us organized design without an organized memory. The marks are physical, repeated, and strong enough to keep the caverns standing through centuries of water and soil movement. But the instructions behind them are gone. Engineers and geologists have approached these chambers not as folklore, but as a real rock mechanics problem. In published studies, they treat the Longyou caverns as large, complete ancient rock chambers, whose structural survival itself demands an explanation. The pillars are positioned to support the roof. The walls are cut with care. The caverns are separated by rock partitions that were left in place intentionally. This is not random quarrying. This is a system. But the system's plan did not travel with the system. A quarry leaves records, a temple leaves dedications, a tomb leaves names. Here the builders left everything except the one thing that usually lasts the longest, the story of who they were and why they cut so much stone. The caverns survived. The memory did not. That turns Longyou into a different kind of object. It is not a legend waiting to be proven. It is a completed underground complex that works well enough to still be here, and yet feels cut off from the surface history that should explain it. The deeper you go inside these halls, the stranger the silence becomes. So what kind of organization cuts 24 underground halls with parallel tool marks, removes nearly 1 million cubic meters of rock, and then vanishes from the written record? The caverns are strong, but the knowledge that made them is weak in the record. That is the missing workshop problem, and it is exactly what makes the next underground site so startling. Because after a place where the plans have disappeared, we move to a place where the plan itself is the shock. In Greece, 2 teams started from opposite sides of a mountain and aimed for each other through a kilometer of solid rock. The question there is not why they dug. It is how they knew where the other darkness was. The Longyou caverns left us with an image of missing records, great halls carved from rock with no clear builder's story. But now we come to a place where the record was never lost, and the story is even harder to dismiss. 6th century before Christ. The Greek island of Samos. The mountain called Castro. The ancient city needed water, and the solution was not a surface canal, but a tunnel. An aqueduct driven straight through the mountain. 1,036 meters of solid limestone, more than a kilometer of rock. And the plan did not begin at one end and hope to emerge at the other. 2 separate crews started from opposite sides of the mountain, digging toward a meeting point they could not see. Think of that. 2 lines of darkness crawling through stone, guided by nothing but geometry and nerve. The purpose, bringing water to an ancient city, is clear. The mystery is not why they dug. The mystery is how accurately they knew where the other darkness was. The tunnel was not a gamble that succeeded by luck. It was a deliberate calculation. The engineers had to maintain a precise slope for water flow and align the headings so that the 2 teams would meet. A deviation of just a few meters could have meant missing each other entirely, leaving an underground scar with no connection. Yet they met. The join is visible inside the mountain. 2 sections of tunnel that came together with a precision that still makes modern surveyors pause. Herodotus, writing in the 5th century before Christ, recorded the achievement. Today, the tunnel is part of a UNESCO World Heritage Site, recognized as a feat of ancient engineering. This is not a legend whispered in a tavern. It is a documented, measured, walkable passage that proves ancient builders could solve an underground geometry problem most of us would not attempt without modern instruments. The water system worked. The purpose is undeniable. But that only sharpens the question. We have an aqueduct that functioned, and a method that should not have worked so smoothly with the tools of the time. The tunnel turns a simple story. Ancient people built water tunnels into a harder one. Ancient people solved underground geometry at a level we rarely attribute to that era. So here, the underground world finally gives us a case where the function is clear and the record exists. And that clarity does not reduce the mystery, it intensifies it. Because if a 6th century BC crew could thread a kilometer-long tunnel through a mountain with nothing but line of sight and mathematics, then what else could they do beneath the earth that we have not yet found or understood? Now the question is no longer whether ancient builders could work underground. The question is how much of their underground knowledge we have not found yet. 4 places. 4 different kinds of underground pressure. In Central Europe, hundreds of narrow Erdstall tunnels cut through the earth, barely wider than a body, too tight for ordinary shelter, too empty for ordinary life. In Egypt, beneath the Saqqara Plateau, long stone corridors house massive sarcophagi, each one weighing around 40 tons, with lids near 25 tons, a burial purpose that does nothing to lighten the stone. In China, 24 artificial caverns in Longyou County, hidden under ponds until 1992, their walls covered with parallel chisel marks, their construction story strangely absent from any written record. And on the Greek island of Samos, a tunnel cut through Mount Castro, 1,036 meters long, dug from both sides in the 6th century before Christ, until 2 teams met in the darkness with mathematical precision. Each of these is a real place. Each can be measured. Each forces a different question. The Erdstall tunnels ask why so much labor was spent on passages that almost refuse a practical explanation. The Serapeum asks how you move a loaded truck's worth of stone through underground corridors and then seal it in darkness. The Longyou caves ask what kind of organization carves 24 great halls from living rock and leaves behind no clear memory of the builders. And the Tunnel of Eupalinos asks a sharper version of the same question. Not why they dug, but how accurately they knew where the other darkness was. Herodotus preserved the memory of that tunnel. Modern UNESCO recognition keeps it visible today. So the final object is not a rumor. It is a documented feat of ancient engineering that still makes the visitor stop and recalculate what was possible. Now step back from each individual site and look at the pattern. One underground complex can be dismissed as a local oddity. A second might be explained away by ritual or practical need. But four separate systems, separated by geography and centuries, each demanding massive organized effort, each resisting a simple, complete explanation. That pattern is harder to ignore. The official version of history tends to read from the surface: temples, pyramids, palaces, cities. But these underground places suggest something else. They suggest that a significant part of human technical organization was directed downward, into the earth, and that what we see today may be only the fraction that survived. Known purpose does not erase lost method. Unknown purpose does not erase real labor. The stone, the tunnels, the carved halls, the meeting point inside the mountain, none of them ask for belief. They ask for measurement. And the measurements are uncomfortable. So the question is no longer whether ancient and medieval builders could work underground. They clearly could. The question is how much of that underground knowledge we have not found yet. How many other passages, galleries, chambers, and precision-cut tunnels remain hidden beneath fields, beneath deserts, beneath ponds, beneath the ordinary surface of the world. The surface story is familiar. The underground story is not finished. If this is what survived, what has the surface already erased?